So, like with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and just like there's so much available now, the earlier manuscripts, all of this ancient Near East, Second Temple. Uh, it's just so evident. Why wouldn't an intellectually honest scholar with all the material that he has at his disposal today, which is um, I believe I heard one time that everything that someone like Luther or Calvin, like we could find everything that they studied or the equivalent of in just one day on the internet.
Yeah.
Like with everything that's available now, um, like why wouldn't people be like, man, thank God we have earlier texts, we have more context, we have more worldview. Like this is like it's no one's fault that
Mhm.
you know we didn't have more information or earlier manuscripts or
Mhm.
like w- why why is that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I mean, uh, again, the easy place to start is, boy, that's a lot of work. You know, even if I want to do the work, do I really have time to do the work? And in some cases, yeah, it is laziness, but other cases it's legit. You know, people have full-time jobs. Some of them have more than one
Well, I'm
job.
talking really about
You know,
really about scholars. Like, is it a thing
okay.
that you see in in a lot of the academic
S-
community? We've invested
It really
so much in this
depends.
system.
Yeah,
We
it really
like
depends on a few things. If you're at the beginning of your career, you're zeroed in on a very narrow thing that you know well, whatever you did your dissertation on. And that's where you park for a few years to get tenure. If it intersects with this material, good. If it doesn't, oh well. You know, because it's the publish or perish thing. Some people are locked in by I hate to put it this way, but by where they teach. Okay, I'm not going to give any names here, but just in the last 2 months, I have had a friend whose work I value and quote in unseen realm lose his job. In other words, not get renewed for tenure. This is going to sound insane, but it's true. Precisely because he was teaching the New Testament in the Second Temple Jewish context. In other words, he was doing the thing you wish others were doing, and he gets fired for it.
what other context are you going to read it in?
That's a very good question. What you're going to do is you're going to read it according to our traditions. What jives and what is comfortable with, what is compatible with our denominational positions and sort of the history of where we've been as a denomination. That's what you're going to do. And it doesn't matter that, well, none of my colleagues are doing that. Everybody's doing what I was doing. So, well, it's just too bad that you're you, so, but I mean, that happens. So you have people who either maybe they're exaggerating it in their minds a little bit, that there's a fear of their job, and in some cases it's very real. So some scholars get hemmed in, by that as well. Others find certain conclusions uncomfortable. And the Genesis 6 thing is a good example. I mean, you can look at all the data and know that basically, there might be one person, before the 4th century who didn't embrace the supernatural worldview of this, but I'm going with that guy because that's more comfortable than everyone else. You know what I mean? There's just a comfort level thing. There's this fear of sort of getting, laughed at or belittled or kind of criticized, for going off on, too much on the deep end, the supernatural deep end. So scholars are subject to that too, just like lay people are. The only thing that changes is the community, in other words, where you get the flack from. So that happens too. So there's just a number of reasons for that. I in my head, it wasn't this issue, but it was other things that providentially I learned that academic respectability is a myth a long time ago. And here's where it started for me. When I went to the Ivy League, I have an MA from Penn, University of Pennsylvania. my field was Egyptology and ancient history, and had some Old Testament in there, some Hebrew. One day I had some time to kill before class, and I decided to go to the Semitics reading room. I mean, the University of Pennsylvania has been around for hundreds of years. It's got this revered, Semitics program. And I went there and I was feeling a little impish, I guess, that day. And I thought, I'll bet in an hour or two, I can do this. I'm going to go through all of the stacks of the books here. And I'm going to look to see how many evangelical publishers I can find. How many of these books are written in an evangelical press? I found one book. One book. It was R.K. Harrison's Introduction to the Old Testament. Okay, that taught me a lesson. I don't want to hear about your objectivity anymore. Okay, you can tell me about how objective your scholarship is, but when you refuse to stock books by evangelical presses, you're no longer objective.
Gotcha, yeah.
Because I can go to an evangelical seminary library and pull off the non-evangelical books, and there'll be thousands of them.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it anymore. So I don't know what stuck that in my head to do that, but I actually killed a couple hours one night going through the stacks just to see. So, we have this notion that as people who take the scripture seriously, that we need to sort of sound less, academics would use the word sound less fundamentalish, but less evangelical, less predisposed to thinking uncritically about the scriptures to be respected. That's just bunk, okay? Because they don't do it. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's one point. The other point is you can do that. You can play that game. But as soon as someone finds out that, you actually believe like in a Trinity, you actually believe that Jesus was God incarnate. Okay, we love your work, but you're just a little out to lunch there.
Uh-huh.
In other words, your confessional scholarship knocks you down a few notches. Now, there are exceptions. Not every academic who's not a Christian thinks this way, but a lot of them do. A lot of them do. So I think a lot of evangelical scholars are fearful of sort of losing face or having a bit of a less reputation. But I know a number of them that have thrown that to the wind. And, generally, they have the reputation established and people sort of already know, where they're at. And they're good. But again, if they drift off, this is why, again, I appreciate the scholars who have endorsed the book. Because again, if you put them in certain settings, they would be criticized for doing so. But the ones who have endorsed the book, it's like, we're fine. We understand what's going on here. And I think they're at the point in their own spiritual lives, their own academic careers where they can say, look, the onus is really on you. The onus is really on you because all of these things start with the assumption that there is a God. If there's a God, can he create beings like himself? Well, if he's God, why couldn't he? And if he can do that and he can give them certain attributes, why can't they do some of these things that we see in the Old Testament? By what logic is this eliminated now? If God really can do miraculous things, then on what basis do we eliminate these other things? I mean, in other words, they've put the thought in and they can see that, the onus is really on you because all of this fundamentally goes back to one question. Is there a God or not? And if that proposition is coherent, and it certainly is, I mean, people who aren't even believers have defended it well, historically, just in terms of sheer logic, okay? If that proposition holds, then you don't really have any intellectual basis to chop these other things off at their knees. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but scholars are prone to the same pressures, that the average person is.
Last question, Mike, for this session, and